Alright, my friends, this is your seat at the table. Rick the Fat Man here with another installment of Middle-earth role-playing game system, also known as MERP. This is produced by Iron Crown Enterprises, ICE. This is Angmar, the Land of the Witch King, which is one of the earliest installments in the game system. It came out, there was like a pack of 6 or 7 that came out about the same time when they introduced the game. And this one here, to me it lacks some material. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it is as fully developed as the others are, or the person who created it lacked inspiration. And I grant you, this is a corner of Middle-earth that's kind of a backwater and only important to a certain role. So much harder for them to come up with or think in world stuff. So they probably needed to spend a little more time at development on it, in my opinion. But as typical of all MERP books, we have the section on notes on the features and use of the Middle-earth series, definitions, give you an idea what you're dealing with if you're not familiar with J.R. Tolkien's works, Middle-earth campaigns, adapting the module to your fantasy role-playing campaign, utilizing it to utilize different fantasy role-playing game systems. Some, in this case, we got information locks and traps, some suggested spell lists, special notes concerning maps and interpretation. So we got some geography and pretty much all the symbology that you find on a map. It's laid out for you, so if you don't understand how to read a map, it's there. This is a secondary map for the game master, which locates key fortresses and towns and what kind of populations you can and creatures you can find. So typically dragons, wolves, wargs, orcs, there's scrub pine, so it goes through here. Right over. This is wrong, because this isn't unless it's just it's a town or a fortress that's named that. But Redor is a province of Arnor and or a kingdom state at some point, and it's much further away from this location than that implies. I don't know if that was a mistake or what's going on there. We have the introduction to Angmar, or the game system, choosing an area. It said ICE chose a period from 1600 to 1700 Third Age for the approximate date of Middle-earth packages. This date was chosen for a variety of factors concerning the history of Western Middle-earth in mind. We feel that the era chosen creates many interesting possibilities for adventure while simultaneously recreating some of the glories of the Third Age at their height. In Gondor, travelers may see the fair sea minus Ithil before it became minus Morgul. In the north, adventurers may see the town of Tharbad or the beauty of Fornost. Very emphasis that Eredor recalls the land at times of war. The Ring, Plague, Third Age, 1636 left many of the towns standing empty. Eredor has become a no man's land to tempt the adventurous. The north lies under the evil shadow of Angmar, something that must always be reckoned with. Same time, they have the relative security of the northern kingdom of Arthedain to retreat to and a cause to strive for if they wish. This area presents a pleasant balance of powers of good and evil, and adventure and safety. The players can fight evil powers. We're not pressured to do so. The fall of the northern kingdom still lies far in the future. So we got a background. Angmar itself, one of the grimmest places in Middle-earth. It's not black and twisted like Mordor, but heartbreakingly cold and barren. It lies in the northern fork of the western Misty Mountains and the eastern Misty Mountains. Little activity. Angmar, the land and the climate, the water, the flora and fauna of Angmar, a troll hole, giants, dragons, bears, the people and cultures of Angmar. Said several manuscripts follow the banner of the Witch King. There are the men of Redor and Rune and Estrau people. North runs from the Vales of Anduin Although people as a whole are not entirely wicked, the leadership that governs them is evil. The groups supply most of the soldiers for Angmar. Some members of these racial groups have even chosen to make their permanent home here. Managed inhabitants of Angmar come from a variety of sources and fall into two groups, freemen and slaves. Freemen are often retired soldiers who have chosen to settle the region. Many of the poorest people from Arnor and Rune, members of the Estrot people, especially young men, join the armies of Angmar seeking wealth and opportunity. Retired soldiers who settle in Angmar are well rewarded. The philosophy of Angmar is completely compatible with the cultures of these people. Although societies differ in many ways, they share many features that will harmonize with the Witch King's goals. All three cultures are extremely warlike. They place high prestige on the rank of the warrior. Simultaneously, the social structure of each is very rigid. The upper class consists of the warriors who fight out of pleasure and declare war as it pleases them. The lower classes are the peasants and slaves who till the land and go to war when they are ordered to. War is an accepted part of life. It is considered part of the natural course of events. For a Runish peasant, the armies of Angmar represent social mobility. By joining up and fighting well, they rise not only to the coveted rank of warrior, but to a level of relative affluence. Angmar reinforces this by offering the ex-soldier a place where his status will be held in his honor. If the peasant returned to his own home, he might still be scorned and forced back into a lesser role. So we got the outlook, village life, economy, government service, currencies of Angmar, village life, politics and power. The Dunedain is 1700s. Arthedain is the only surviving kingdom of the three realms of Arnor. Rulers claim rulership over all of Arnor, but since no heirs of Isor remain in Cardlin or Radur, this claim is in name only. The borders of the Arthedain have contracted sharply since the plague, and the kingdom does not have the resources to protect a larger territory. The lord of Arthedain is called Avergel, and he has assumed the throne upon the death of Argleb II in the plague. Despite the lessening of the strength of the Dunedain, the king still maintains a strong guard upon the diminished borders. Angmar techniques, goals, and strategies. The Witch King. For the most part, the Witch King is taking a long view. He's undead. He don't have to be in a hurry. His goal right now is just to keep adding pressure, applying pressure to the Dunedain, surviving Dunedain, Arthedain, and Arnor, to wear them down, to drive them off, and to destroy them, and occasionally sending out raids but is marshaling his strength and after the fall of the battles of Cardlin and the fall of Cardlin, he's rebuilding his forces. The Witch King himself, basically a tool of Sauron. I mean, he is what he is. I mean, he's not. While he's got some independent abilities to do what he wants, he's still at the end of the day dancing to the strings of his master. Troops and military information, various generals, information, the black trolls. The best warriors of the Hurk are the 6 Olgahai, or black trolls. These creatures were bred in the pits of Carndum with the aid of Sauron's power. Special units, the crossbowmen, the trackers, additional members, weapons and armor of the armies of Angmar, places to note Carndum. Long before the Witch King came to Angmar, the dwarves had many flourishing mines in the region. The halls were secure and prosperous, and the dwarves first remained untroubled by evil things that began to multiply. It was not long, however, before Durin's folk felt the first assaults of Angmar. The dwarves fled south, seeking the safety of their mines in the Weather Hills. It was they who gave the fortress to the Witch King its name, Carndum. They called it, or the Red Stronghold. The name is a rarity among place names in western Middle-earth. It is apparently a combination of Dwarvish and Elvish words. Witch King, blah blah blah. Exterior defense of Carndum, interior of Carndum, the lower levels. Notes on layouts in Angmar, key to use. So you got flame traps, ceiling traps, spike pits, guard rooms, doors, gates, basic mechanisms. So we got some blueprints, maps of the castle itself, and some of the many of the key underground chambers. The border region, border castles of Angmar. There's 3 major ones. lot of information on those. Institution, here's the typical a fortified village, and an example of a village you would find in Angmar. And who's here? The council, blacksmith, carpenters, weavers, farmers, few NPCs, no man's land, some keeps and watchtowers, Arnor Castle. The castle was built by by a wealthy Arnorian Dunedain family, and then they lost their castle, much to their great shame. The keep, another map. Which, by the way, that's what this map. This was the big map that came with it. So this area here generally is considered Angmar, and Angmar controls this area up here during its existence. Herb Lord of the Dunedain, supplies for the outpost, designing a castle. The Marines were some of the finest healers and physicians of all the world. Healing herbs, some stats, basic information, siege equipment. As you can see, there's not really a huge amount, some suggestion for adventures, not a huge amount of in-depth material for this particular location. And it could have been better in my mind. There's still a lot of useful material here, but generally speaking, it's very vague. We got Gundabad up here. We got Mount Graham here. These are two of the largest Orcish citadels, or cities, if you will. It suggests upwards of 30,000 plus orcs inhabit it. Gundabad and Mount Graham is quite as big, but you can see one of the reasons that the Sauron and his puppet, the Witch King, chose Angmar as a place to create a so-called country to combat Arnor. The whole purpose of Angmar's existence was to defeat Arnor, and it didn't matter how long it took. They weren't in any hurry. There wasn't any great pressure to come in and sweep in. So they established a kingdom and ruled by the Witch King, in theory, with a bunch of mannish lieutenants and generals and so on and so forth. Plus, he has access to the hordes of all these large concentrations of orc holds, giving him some access. Plus, as far north as the Misty, this is the top of the Misty Mountains, the furthest northern section, and then you got the Gray Mountains are over here, and there's a series of passes here that allow men and material to move through. And if you go down through the Misty Mountains, there's only a handful of locations where that's viable in any large numbers. There's always hidden little mountain paths and goat paths and things like this, and that you can marvelly work your way through some of the areas of the mountains, but the Misty Mountains. But there are certain areas that are established as highways, and this is one of them. Now, back at a different time, this whole area over here was ruled and operate under the control of the Rohirrim's ancestors before they moved south to form the Rohirrim itself, or Rohan. This made it much more harder. At that time, though, it was a different time from when Angmar existed, so they weren't in conflict with each other. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have been available to go to south and help Gondor, because I imagine Angmar would have thinned them out pretty thick, or pretty hard. Meanwhile, there's, as forming kingdoms go, an undead wraith who's pretty much still a puppet of and controlled by the Sauron, is not looking for fame and fortune, so to speak. Command and control comes with being one of Sauron's chief tools. So forming this so-called kingdom is more as a placebo for the mannish forces that they rally together to utilize against Arnor. And in my opinion, so there's villages and towns, but there's not a whole huge amount of them. There's more citadels and castles and things like this up here, mostly for places to store materials and gather hosts and barracks, house them. So then when Angmar takes over Radur, Radur is down here toward the end or lower end of the map, in this area here, which is now a substantive territory that owes allegiance to the Witch King. So in that aspect, I don't think that it was a viable kingdom in the truth. You can make an argument the people lived there for a while, but once once the Arthedain falls and the Witch King flees, and most of his armies is destroyed by the forces of Gondor and the elves, Angmar ceases to exist as a country, and the fortresses and towns probably withered and died, because according to this, a lot of these towns, the agriculture up here is very poor, so they barely eke out a survival existence, and they need supplies and regular resupply on a regular basis, which is controlled by Angmar, the Witch King's minions and things like that, and are brought from the east to be distributed. So that's one way they kept control over their so-called subjects. Just thinking, that's my opinion on that subject anyway. This is a very harsh and hospitable area, yet there are plenty of things for some hardy, die-hard adventurers to come up here and go look for and try to find. Settling, you're not likely to find most of the human subjects of Angmar eventually head south. They head back across the mountains and back into where they came from, or they move south and become part of the Hillman tribes and the Dunlandings, because the whole region is just not suitable for a viable culture to thrive, as best I understand it. So there you have it, Angmar, the land of the Witch King.